Have you ever wondered how your student will do in college, or if they're even ready academically for when they get there? Well, I'm Emily Eaton. I'm a university instructor and an academic coach for homeschool students, and I'm here to tell you 3 skills that will help your student be successful in college. Also, the same 3 skills that every university professor hopes and wishes that your student would know before they get to college. But so many students don't actually learn these skills until they arrive. And so the 3 skills that we're going to be talking about today are note-taking, study skills, and time management. Now, sure, I think I am able to talk about these skills with confidence because I'm a university instructor, but also because I'm a nerd at heart. I loved note-taking, study skills, and time management all through high school, and it led me to do really well in college. I actually graduated with a 4.0 for my undergraduate and my master's degree, and was the outstanding graduate for both of my degrees, which was amazing and such a blessing, but also I think is a testament to how important these skills are. Now, I have taught thousands of college students these skills through my role at Palm Beach Atlantic University. And what really amazes me is how many students aren't thriving with these skills before they get to college. And so I want to help you equip your homeschool student to already master these skills by the time they get to college. Let's go ahead and start our conversation with note-taking. One of the main questions I get asked by my college students, and that is, should we handwrite or type our notes? Ways to discern what is a better option for my student, or for me if you're a student listening to this, is a couple of things. It's considering the pros and cons of each. Now, on the one hand, typing is for a lot of us going to be faster. We can tend to type faster than we can handwrite. And so if speed is our goal, maybe we want to type. However, we tend to memorize and learn a little bit better by handwriting. And so in situations where we can write fast, or the content is going slowly enough that we can keep up with handwriting, I lean toward handwriting because it's going to help us process that information a little bit better. The caveat is, if we don't understand what we're writing, we can't even read our own handwriting, then typed notes might be a better option. So now that we've got typed versus handwritten out of the way, we have to jump into content. What should we be writing down? Well, for the students that I do see taking notes, and I'm so grateful they're taking notes, I oftentimes see them seeing a PowerPoint slide and writing down as fast as they can, all the words they can possibly get on their paper. And they're missing out on listening and processing through information. They're kind of just regurgitating whatever's been said in a lecture. And so I am not a fan of someone writing down word for word what has been said. I think it's a much more advantageous option for a student to write down concept for concept as opposed to word for word. I think it's also really important for a student to write down what's being said in their own words. It doesn't help the student if they are just writing down what a teacher, what a professor is saying, but they don't understand what they're saying. So writing it down in their own words, in their own vocabulary, helps them with a couple of things. 1, it helps them process. 2, it helps them actually understand what they're writing down. And 3, it helps them remember when they go back and read through it. They aren't just having to wrap their brain around, what was the professor actually talking about in this moment? So that's part of our content conversation. Another aspect that I really emphasize for note-taking is writing down examples. Whether that's examples that the teacher or professor provided, or examples that the student has thought about on their own. That helps with being able to apply the information, because I don't want a student just to hear information and then forget it the next day or memorize a definition. I want them to be able to apply it to their life, to their job, to an exam if they have one later on, all these different areas. And the third aspect that I would ensure is being written down are questions. Whether that's questions that the student has, or just putting a question mark next to concepts that they don't understand. That way, they can go back and find the answer or ask their teacher for that answer. It will help with fuller learning of the material. But I'm sure a big question that's coming off your mind is, When is a homeschool student actually going to be able to put these note-taking strategies into practice? Because a homeschool student isn't really, in most cases, in a typical school setting. Sometimes they might have a co-op or dual enrollment or experiences where they're in a more of a classroom type environment, but not always. Many times homeschool students are independent learning. I know that was my situation. In most of my situations, I was learning from a textbook. I was more independent studying than I was in a classroom. And so it begs the question, when do they practice this note-taking? So I have a couple ideas. If the student is in a classroom type environment, even if it's for one class, that's a perfect time to practice note-taking strategies, whether that's in dual enrollment or in a co-op or what have you. But they might also be involved in community service and leadership experiences. I know that was my situation. I was really involved in 4-H. I was in leadership and experiences, a lot of like civic engagement type experiences. I was leading meetings, and I was always known as the dedicated secretary. I was going to be taking notes anyway, and so I might as well be the secretary for the meeting. Now, your student might not be in that type of an environment yet, and I do really believe that leadership and community service is important for scholarships, for personal growth, for college applications. We'll talk more about that in a future podcast episode. But if they're not in that type of environment and they aren't in a classroom environment, there are still opportunities to practice note-taking. I imagine your student is probably watching TV at some point, or listening to YouTube, or listening to a podcast, or doing something with regards to media. That can be a great time to take notes and practice. So whatever their favorite show is, whatever YouTube video they're listening to at the moment, can they practice some of those note-taking strategies in front of the TV? Can make a leisure and fun activity productive even, and a good practice for note-taking. Note-taking is super important because it leads us to our next skill, which is study skills. Now, I'll ask you the question that I ask all my college students. Do you believe that rereading your notes is an effective way to study? And if you're anything like my college students, you're probably thinking, yes, rereading my notes is a great way to study. But it's actually not. Rereading your notes is great for clarification and learning information, but where it is severely lacking is recalling that information. And that's all of what studying is about. And so we need to have the notes, because without the notes, we have nothing to study. But if we are only focused on rereading our notes, for the most part, we aren't going to do as well on the exam or in applying it to life. And this is what I hear from so many of the college students that I encounter. They tell me, and they say, Professor Eaton, I did so well in high school. I got A's. I did excellent. But I'm struggling in my college classes, and I don't know why. And then I ask them about their time management, which we'll talk about in a second, and their study skills. And they tell me, well, in high school I really didn't need to study. I could just reread my notes and I would do just fine. But college isn't quite like that in most cases. And for some students that'll be enough. But for the majority of students, rereading their notes is not an effective way to study. And so if the goal is not just understanding information, but recalling information, we need to have a more effective study method. So I want to go through 3 different study skills that I have found so effective for my life that I hope are effective in your homeschool student's life as well. And those are flashcards, teaching someone else, and testing yourself. Flashcards are my absolute favorite. If you're watching the video, here's a picture of me with my flashcards that I made after 1 semester of college. At the end of the semester, I would do what I called a burning of the note card ceremony, where I would say good riddance to the semester. I would go ahead and burn all the flashcards and watch them go away as a way to kind of wrap up the semester. But I loved note cards because they are so effective. Flashcards. And so a couple strategies and tips when it comes to flashcards is if you're anything like me, you know there's an easy side of the flashcard and a harder side of the flashcard. So what do I mean? Easy side is you write the term on one side, you're looking at the term, and then you write the definition on the other. You look at the definition and you have to try to remember what term that was. That's easier. The harder side is you look at the term and you have to remember what the definition is. Make sure that you're practicing and that your student is practicing both sides of the card. This is important because on an exam or on life, you aren't just having to, oh, I know that term, I know that one. You need to apply the term, meaning you have to remember what it means. So always make sure you're doing the hard side of the card. Make sure that the information you're writing on the card is accurate, because no one wants to memorize inaccurate information. A lot of my strategies for what to write on the card overlap with my strategies from note-taking. So you want to make sure that you put enough on the card to understand what it means, but not too much that it's overwhelming, but also applying or including examples or ways to apply the information is integral. Because we don't want to just memorize definitions. We want to apply them well for exams and for life. Something else that I always remind students is that taking the time to actually write out the note cards is a matter of memorization in itself. And so I'm not a huge fan of students using Quizlet. It's better than nothing, and I do think it has its place. But if you're putting in Quizlet, you aren't always taking the time to remember that as well as if you were to take the time and write all of the information. Quizlet isn't horrible. Where I do have an issue is when I hear students using someone else's Quizlet, because then you didn't get the benefit of taking the time to write out or type out the information, which helps you with learning. Now, same question might apply. Some homeschool students are leaning on doing tests or exams or things you need to study for, but that isn't everyone's homeschool structure. So how can we practice flashcards? Well, I have loved flashcards for memorizing Bible verses as well. And so that can be just another way to, in life, use this study skill. But there's always going to be tests in life, sometimes even beyond college, whether that's certification exams or in a career, so study skills are helpful. Another study skill that I love is teaching yourself, because as you hear yourself speak something out loud, especially if you can teach someone else, you're going to notice gaps and areas that you don't actually understand of the material. I give the idea of when you're teaching someone else, pretend that you are teaching to a 5-year-old. And with homeschooling, it's super cool because so many families, I know my family was in this situation, have lots of siblings or age gaps in siblings. So for me, for instance, I have a little sister who's 10 years younger than me. So when I was 15, she was 5. And so it wasn't just pretending I'm explaining to a 5-year-old, it actually was explaining to a 5-year-old at that point in time. But the reason I love that illustration of explain it as if you were explaining to a 5-year-old is because 5-year-olds don't have this expansive vocabulary. And so you have to really get to the root of what we're talking about and explain it in the most basic terms. I was an economics tutor when I was in college, and I would explain concepts that on paper were talking about millions of dollars, thousands of dollars, but I hadn't had millions of dollars. So I would explain it in 10s and 20s and candy and the concepts that were more relevant to me at that point in time. Still don't have millions of dollars, so sticking with hundreds, thousands, candies, that kind of thing as an illustration is much more helpful for me. But it's explaining it in ways that a 5-year-old can understand, which I think is really helpful. The last tip is testing yourself. And so what I always explain to my college students is that if you know the format of the exam, that's how you should test yourself. So a multiple choice exam, flashcards are great. So an essay exam, you're going to want to practice writing essays. An oral exam, practice giving presentations. Some ways that I have found really effective for preparing for either of these methods is to bullet point all of the information that you want to express, and then to practice putting it all into an essay, timing yourself so that you're getting that practice. Give a speech, record the speech, watch it, see how you did. These essays are all about synthesizing information, pulling pieces together. So another aspect that could be helpful as a start is to mix up your flashcards, put topics together so you aren't just focused on practicing one grouping of topics. You're learning how does this topic relate to that topic. The third skill that we are focusing on in this conversation is time management. And while I didn't come up with this time management model, a time management model that I really appreciate is the 3 A's: awareness, arrangement, and adaptation. Now, I think the perfect time to begin instilling time management into our students is around middle school time frame, but high schoolers can still practice time management, college students can still practice time management, adults can still practice time management. This is a skill that all of us can continue to learn and improve upon because it helps us be successful and thrive in so many facets of life. But the first A is awareness. It's this idea that just like we need to budget our money because we have limited money, we have to budget our time because we have limited time. And so the first step of awareness is helping your student even be aware that time is limited and that they aren't able to do anything they want. They have a limited amount of time each day. The other important piece of awareness is what's called a peak performance time. It's this idea that every single one of us has times during the day that we are most productive at certain types of tasks. So for me, when I was early on in my career, I started to discover that I really loved talking to people in the afternoon, and I tend to have a more analytical brain in the morning. And so I would structure my tasks that way. Could I do work that required me to be in front of the computer, analyzing data, anything like that in the morning? And then since I was going to want to talk to people anyway in the afternoon, could I put my meetings more in the afternoon? So something like that. Maybe our student learns that when they're in college, classes would be a better fit for the morning so they can do more homework in the afternoon, for example. It's something that they have to try out and figure out. And if you need help discerning your student's peak performance time, go ahead and schedule a free consultation with me. I'd love to talk through our process and move forward with booking a coaching session if you're interested. The second A is arrangement. How are we going to actually arrange our time? So we have this awareness that we need to arrange our time. Now we actually have to go ahead and arrange it. And so it's this idea that we need a to-do list or a calendar or something that shows us when are we working on each area. Now, I was recently talking with one of my college students, and they were telling me that the way they decide what they need to do is based on the syllabus or based on Canvas, our online portal. When is something due? And that's how they know when they need to work on it. And it just made me want to be really sad because that is not a good way to arrange our time. We need to arrange our time to meet that deadline, but not get started on the day of that deadline. So I was talking to that student, and they mentioned to me that if nothing is due, they don't know what to work on. And so part of arrangement is helping our students be self-managed to know I need to study during this window of time, or something is due on this date. It's going to take me a week, so I need to work on it moving up to get it submitted on time. These are skills that we can begin instilling in our middle and our high school students so they aren't caught off guard by the time they get to college. Because in college, no one is going to be there telling them you need to do this on Monday, this on Tuesday, etc. They're going to give them a deadline and tell them they need to work toward it. So maybe there's a subject or two that you can entrust your middle schooler with your guidance, not a full off you go, good luck, but with your guidance and say, okay, these are our goals for the week. How can we structure your time together so that you're able to do it? You're doing it with them in middle school. Then in high school, they already have these skills. So they're able to do it, but they're still home. You can still monitor and see, okay, did they accomplish these things? So middle school, they're learning. High school, they're applying. By the time they're in college, they've already mastered this skill. So they're able to do it on their own. And then the last A is called adaptation. It's this idea that things come up. Life, it gets hard, life happens, unexpected things appear. And so how do we adjust or adapt when that happens? Well, I think part of it comes back to our arrangement. Did we give ourselves enough time for when those out of the blue things come up, that wiggle room, that safety net, so we're no longer behind? But another piece is called eat the big frog first. And I didn't invent this either. I probably would have named it something different because the idea of having to eat any frogs doesn't appeal to me, let alone a big frog. But it's this idea that we need to do the biggest, longest, most daunting task first. Otherwise, we're going to want to put that off. But if we've already accomplished the big task, even if it took us breaking it up into smaller pieces, if we've already accomplished that task, we don't have to worry about if hard things come up or if life gets crazy. We've already checked the biggest thing off our to-do list. We've already eaten the big frog first. So the 3 A's: awareness, arrangement, adaptation. These things can really help us with our time management skills that I think all of us can continue to practice and improve upon. I hope this was helpful for you. I am confident that these 3 skills, if your student is able to begin putting them into practice, begin implementing them, and eventually master them, that it's going to help your student be successful and thrive in college, in their career, and just life in general. This is part of what I offer, and so if you're looking for a little bit of additional guidance, support, help, I would love to provide that for you. I offer a free consultation to any family that's interested, and the link is in my biography in the show notes as well. I would love to help you. Otherwise, stay tuned for our next episode of Homeschool Next Steps podcast. I look forward to talking with you then, and hope that you'll connect with me soon by liking, subscribing. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm so thankful for your time today, and I'll talk to you soon.